continue learning and sharing knowledge. So we have the ability to keep working in our formation as a professional. So, well, today we are going to continue with our webinar. So, Sección de Idiomas from Facultad de Humanidades. Facultad de Humanidades is really happy. It's really happy to working for this webinar. And well, today we want to give a special greeting for our students from Antigua, Guatemala location, because today is the first time that they are participating in this webinar. So welcome to our second webinar. I want to share with you some instructions to work in this webinar. So we are going to have our presentation, and after that, you can make the questions and we are going to provide the answers. For the attendance list, we are going to post the link at the end of the presentation. So we hope you can enjoy this activity and take advantage of the information that will be provided for our special speaker. So I want to share with you a special quote. Education is the passport to the future. For tomorrow belongs to those who prepare for it today. So, well, let's prepare together and increase our knowledge. So, I want to give the word to the head of our section, Dr. Park. Welcome, and the time is for you.
Thank you very much. Hi, everyone. Good morning. Welcome, Savannah. We are really happy to have you in our event. First of all, on behalf of our university authorities, Master Mazariego Spiolis, Dean of our Faculty of Humanities, we warmly welcome you to our second activity, our second webinar. Thank you for accepting our invitation to this webinar. We are very happy and pleased that you are joining us and telling us about your experience in the field of teaching and learning another language and how we can maintain this dynamic in the time of the COVID-19. For us as teachers, it is very complex time and not being physically present in our classrooms with our students. However, we have to adapt and carry out our task at a distance. So that's why we will be very attentive to your point of views, suggestions, recommendations on how to improve our learning interaction with our students, since we are beginning our second semester at our university with our students. So thank you again for being with us. I also appreciate our audience who have already connected to participate in this event, mainly our students from Antigua, Guatemala, and her teacher, Julissa Ascuac. Thank you for your attendance. I know that you will be very pleased at the end of this meeting, of this conference, of this webinar, of this talking well. So we will see what's going on. Finally, I would like to invite you for our last webinar next week, August the 1st at 4 p.m. So enjoy this one, and thank you very much, and see you later. Welcome again, and thank you, Savannah. Welcome.
Thank you, Dr. Park. So we are glad to hear you. And today I want to present our special guest. So today we have the participation of Mrs. Savannah Dixon. So she was born and raised in Memphis, Tennessee. So Savannah finds herself somewhere she never would have dreamed. After studying and working as an architect, she found herself unfulfilled in work and started teaching English to Latin immigrants in her community. It was there that she found her passion. After receiving and serving one term as an English teacher assistant with a Fulbright grant, she decided to stay and start helping the development of the USA Embassy's English Language Program, ELP, in Quiché. Savannah loves her job, her students, and the teachers that make up the national ELP team. She loves spending time with her cats, planning her December wedding, and is currently working towards her master's in inclusive and intercultural education. So, well, we believe that she can share us a lot of experience in this webinar. Strategies for EFL online teaching. Well, so welcome, Savannah, and the time is for you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Ana Maria. And I am so happy to be here with all of you today. And I hope that I can share with you some of the ways that we have been adapting to this obviously very unexpected change in our world. And I am really excited that, that USAC asked me to be here and asked me to help. So yeah, let's get started. So first of all, I want to start with some the objectives for today. So we're going to go through kind of an introduction about me, and then we're going to talk about, I feel like before we can start talking about strategies, we really have to talk about the challenge, right? We can't really approach the challenge without understanding, or approach our strategies without understanding the current challenge that we're in. And then I want to define some strategies and talk about how to apply those strategies. So briefly, like Ana Maria said, I am from the United States. I am technically educated and trained as an architect. I started teaching English as a pastime, basically, and I fell in love with it. And I loved my students, and I was able to teach students from all over the world, from Peru, from Iraq, from Portugal, from Honduras, Mexico, Guatemala, from all over Latin America, and it was an incredible experience. And so through that, I was able to apply for a Fulbright grant to come and work here. So I started working with the embassy in 2019, and I kind of, I saw some need for development in Quiché, and I was like, let's go. And I was excited to move here, and now I'm not stuck here in a bad way, but I am, I can't go back to the United States right now. And so I'm taking advantage of that I started my master's, and I've been involved in a lot of different workshops like this throughout the year. So I'm super excited to share some of my strategies and ideas with all of you. So first I want to watch this video really quick. This is our new normal. And it's something we have to accept before we can start moving towards what we can do about it. So this is a video of how quickly the world shut down schools. We shut down internationally schools so quickly and on a national level. So the pink is localized, purple is national. So almost every major country in the world created a countrywide stop in education. This created a huge transition issue, right? Because we were left with a lot of students from a lot of different classes, races, countries, contexts that had no way of learning. So as you can see at the end of this video, these are in the blue, these are the only countries that are open currently for education. And even though they're open, it does not mean that all of their students are going to school every day, 9 to 5 or 7 to 3. That's not what they're doing yet. And so this was updated 2 days ago, but the average that people are thinking is that we have about 1.5 billion children who have been interrupted from their schooling this year. And that's mind-blowing. Currently, we think that there's about 2.2 billion children on the planet. So this is more than half of the children in the world are not in school and are having their learning interrupted. And I think that that's a really important kind of statistic or number to get our heads around before we can start talking about strategies. So this is also a really interesting bit of information. In 2019, we spent globally $18.66 billion on online teaching tools. So that was 7 months ago, 8 months ago. And now we're expected to completely transform our entire education system on a national and global scale with nothing, essentially nothing, compared to the projection in 2025 is that we will be spending 350 billion. So I personally, my guess is that between 2019 and now, we've probably spent $100 billion US dollars on global or on online teaching tools. So that shows you that our learning curve went from 0 to 60 in weeks. So again, we kind of have to understand that as our foundation before we can start moving towards solutions. So that's a global reality, right? We have the global reality that 1.5 billion students are out of school. We have the global reality that 1 in 5 children lives in poverty and can't even eat every day, kind of thing. But our specific reality is very different, right? In Guatemala, it's a totally different reality than the rest of the world, and every country has its own context. So I wanted to point this out. We are here. So this is the share of population that used the internet from 1990 to 2017. So I will say it's about 3 years out of date, but it's very interesting to note that in 2017, less than 40% of Guatemala's population even used the internet. Not out of necessarily poverty or out of misunderstanding, but just there was no need. Most Guatemalans work in agriculture or do work in agriculture or work with trade, so they don't necessarily need internet, which is great because it's an expense that they don't have to pay. But then in March, it went from internet's optional to, well, now my kids can't receive classes, or the only classes my kids receive are on television or through the radio, or my kid's school is sending us tareas and we can't complete them because we don't have internet, or we don't have a computer, or we don't have a smartphone. So this is where we are. Guatemala is slightly below the world in terms of internet usage, but it's years behind even Belize and Mexico and the US. And so we are expected to kind of, jump to this occasion and perform on a level that no one in this country is prepared to tackle. So I work for the English language programs in Guatemala. So what this means is, so the Embassy of the United States has lots of different initiatives that they work in the country with aid and with, with education, anti-immigration, all of that stuff. So I specifically work with the public affairs section, which has a specific goal of working through English education to open doors for our students to study outside of Guatemala, to be able to be translators, to go to school, to get scholarships. There's a lot of different goals that our program has, but we specifically work with hundreds of students across the country. So we have actually a really good sample size of the average student in básico diversificado and what they have available to them. So our first level of challenges are tech. We have tech challenges as probably the number one thing that we have to tackle before we can really talk about education. So this includes internet access, access to different devices, access to apps, bandwidth, the memory of the devices, and data limits. Data limits is a huge thing. So what we have noticed specifically, we have done a lot of different encuestas. What is the word in English? Surveys. We've done a lot of surveys to kind of gauge where our students are in terms of access, right? And so what we've learned is that roughly 60% of our students actually do have Wi-Fi, which is fascinating because, you know, if you go back to this graph, it says that only, I would say in the last 3 years, we've probably gotten up to 40% of this population, maybe 50, but our students, we're seeing about 66%, which shows me as kind of an administrator bird's eye view that our students' generations and their families are investing more in technology and digital tools. But what we've also noticed is that about 25% of our students either don't have a device or they don't have the funds to continue paying for internet during this crisis. And so thankfully, we are very privileged in the fact that we were able to adapt our budgets to be able to help our students pay for internet. But we are a minority by a long shot, and we don't have to teach every single day. We only have to cover between 4 or 6 to 15 hours of class a week, compared to the average teacher, which is having to make up 6 hours to 7 hours a day for 5 days a week, which is like 30 hours. So expecting students to be online for that amount of time or to be able to pay for that level of data in internet is absurd. So our second challenge is physio-emotional. So there was a study that was done at the beginning of May by some researchers. It's a group of researchers from all over the world, but it was completed in the US. And they are estimating that this year students will only have a 66% learning gain. So what that means is that essentially every year we have 100%, let's say, pretend. We shoot for 90 to 100% learning gain, which means that our students are learning 90 to 100% of what we teach them. This study is saying that essentially we're only going to see about 66% of that, which means that next year or whenever we go back to a more normal, I personally don't think that this will ever, it's going to take years for this to normalize from education and from human interaction. And so, yeah, actually, this is a perfect, someone just commented, internet access can be there, but willingness should be there too. And that's exactly what this challenge too is about. Where we have maybe internet access, there's this very big gap in motivation. When our students are at home all day and they can't see their friends, they're not interacting with people, they're not even really interacting with their siblings or with their parents, because everyone is putting on different hats and trying to learn how to kind of cope with this. We have a huge lack of motivation. We have depression and anxiety. We have a big sense of overwhelmedness. I feel like every one of my students has texted me and said, you know, teacher Savannah or coordinator, can I turn in my homework late? I have so much to do for, like normal school. And I have so much to do for, for my tareas from university or whatever. And our English language programs are technically like non-formal education. You know, we work with communities, we have classes after school, they're extracurricular, and it's it's totally different when you're working in a kind of a non-formal education setting than a formal education setting. Both are incredibly important. Both require inclusivity, interculturalism, understanding, flexibility, but you're having to balance which comes first. You're balancing priorities, you're balancing, time, and students aren't prepared for this. When you're working with a 14 or a 15-year-old, they barely know how to tie their own shoes at that point. I mean, I'm only 10 years older than them, and I remember thinking I was brilliant as a 14, 15-year-old, and now understanding that I was totally useless as a 14 or 15-year-old. So it's a really hard thing that they're being expected to understand. And not only do we have, these kind of mental motivation, depression, overwhelmedness, we actually have we're seeing physical issues with, back and neck pain, with tired feet, tired legs, restlessness. Restlessness is a big thing. Our students want to move. They want to get up and run around. They want to get up and, participate with each other. But it's incredibly difficult to find activities or ideas that incorporate that. So those are our two challenge kind of categories. So before we kind of really start defining our strategies, I want to review some vocabulary. I mean, we can't have an education workshop without going through some vocabulary, right? So let's go over some. So first I want to introduce this. So this is not really a new thing. I recently learned about it, and it's kind of fascinating. But it's this 1.0, 2.0, 3.0 education. And essentially, we are moving from 1.0 to 2.0 here in Guatemala, and I think we would love to strive towards 3.0. So essentially, 1.0 means that learners are receptacles of knowledge. This is traditional classroom teaching. You are the teacher, they receive knowledge, they speak back the knowledge to you, essentially. So that's very traditional. 2.0 is that learners are communicating, connecting, and collaborating. And this is a very important, we're going to talk a lot about this when I go through strategies in a minute. But we have, we have a lot of, this gives us the ability to look at communication and connection. Instead of just them being receptacles of knowledge, they return and they are being taking responsibility for their own learning. And then 3.0 is learners as constructivist creators and connectors. So this is when not only are they taking responsibility for their education, but they are creating it. They're researching, they are, taking information that you as a teacher share with them, and they're saying, well, if this is how the grammar works, then this should be the construct, and they're creating that in their own minds. And a lot of 3.0 learning or 3.0 education requires a lot of flexibility, and it's also this beautiful blend of digital and physical tools. So that's education 3.0. So then we have synchronous versus asynchronous learning. And this is one of my strategies that I'm going to talk about. So we'll talk about this a lot more. But essentially, we have synchronous, which is face-to-face, instant messaging. You're working at the same time. You as the teacher are teaching, students are learning, and they are doing work to reinforce that learning live. So this would be, using Skype, Google Meet, Zoom, that kind of thing. Group work, that's synchronous. It's happening at the same time. Asynchronous is utilizing forums, learning management systems, MOOCs. This is where we reflect on complex ideas, right? So asynchronous is not being done with a group, not being done with the teacher. Synchronous learning is being done together. However, I think of group work without the teacher as asynchronous in a lot of ways, but we'll talk about that in a minute. So then we have LMSs. So these are learning management systems. Just to, if I use LMS, I want you to know what I'm talking about. So that's what that stands for. So these are things like Moodle. If you have a curriculum then that you're using and they have an online like platform, that's a learning management system. Google Classroom is a learning management system. So MOOCs, massive online open courses. So a lot of people are using these right now as ways to engage their students without them having to create the content. Universities are using these too a lot. Cooperative learning, oh my goodness, this is essential. So cooperative learning, in my opinion, is the only way that we can effectively teach English as a second or a foreign language. Because, so obviously there's billions of theories and ideologies about the best way to teach a foreign language or a second language. I personally believe that cooperative learning is and then the next one that I'll talk about in a second, is the only way to teach a language that becomes solidified in the brain, because cooperative learning is all about working together, right? It's all about group work. So the 5 kind of tenets of cooperative learning are positive interdependence, individual accountability, face-to-face positive interaction, the development of social skills, and group processing. And I'm going to go through these again. I just wanted you to be kind of aware of them and familiar with this idea before we kind of got into the strategies. So then the last one is the experiential learning cycle. This mixed with collaborative learning, I personally think is the best way to teach English as a foreign or second language. Obviously, this is more geared towards like teaching grammar or teaching communication. It's less effective for literature reading, but you can still apply all of these to it. So experiential learning is concrete experience, reflective observation, abstract conceptualization, and active experimentation. And this is something that I'm not really talking about very much today, but it's something that you should definitely kind of research, and how each of those 4 things informs the other, and how it also is, you know, students who experience what they're learning have motivation to continue learning. And so when we are working with students who are lacking motivation, who are lacking the energy and attitude that they would normally have in a class, you have to make it experiential. You have to give it meaning outside of the classroom. And so, for example, I just gave my students an assignment for American culture, and I had them watch one of the performances from the musical Hamilton. So Hamilton is a musical about the founding of the United States, and it's incredible. It's incredible. And so in order for them to kind of experience what Americans are currently thinking and creating about the founding of the US, I had them watch this video, and so many of them have said, like, "Teacher Savannah, this was so cool. I've never seen something like this. Like, I've never experienced history like this." And so that was something that I allowed them to experience that. And it wasn't just reading or learning something simple. It wasn't me teaching them. I, utilized something else. Okay, so these are our challenges. We have a lack of technology resources from teachers and students. We have a lack of experience with digital teaching and learning. We have a lack of presence and face-to-face observation. Obviously, this is a big challenge. And we have a variance in motivation and or self-regulation of our students and teachers. So these are the challenges that we have to face. So then I want to read this quote. The best online learning combines elements where students go at their own pace, on their own time, and are set up to think deeply and critically about subject matter, combined with elements where students go online at the same time, interacting with other students, their teacher, and content, and receive feedback. So this is a professor from the University of Michigan, or Michigan State University, and I thought that this was like the best way to I thought that this was the best way to kind of solidify or sum up, resume, that's not, summarize the best approach to how we can fight these challenges. So these are my 4 strategies. Extreme flexibility and inclusion, strategy number 1. Lean into cooperative learning techniques. This is essential. Find the balance of synchronous and asynchronous learning that is right for your students. I can't tell you what that balance is. I can't tell you because I teach a totally different age group, a totally different subject, a totally different in a totally different cultural context, and a totally different linguistic context. Most of my students are trilingual. That changes how I think about synchronous and asynchronous learning. And then a network of communication. So let's kind of jump on into these. So flexibility, strategy number 1. Ways that we apply this, number 1, record classes. If you can record your screen or record Zoom or record Skype, however, record them, because I can tell you right now, I have had at least one student in every class that I lost signal, I can't connect, my computer died, my phone crashed, whatever. That means that those students are missing valuable class time that now is more valuable than ever because you're having to really concentrate the information that you do in virtual classes. And it gives you the opportunity to just keep moving. You can't say, well, let's wait for, Santiago to come back. No, like you don't have time to do that. And your students that are in class don't have time to sit through that. So if you can, record your classes. Utilize low data apps. So this includes Facebook, Skype, WhatsApp, Messenger. All of these applications have ways to stream video, to have watch parties that require less data. And a lot of phone plans, that kind of data is considered either free or discounted. So that's a good way to engage your students without them having to take on that additional cost. Always have a backup plan. So when your students, can't get into class or whatever, always have something kind of ready for when that fails, because you will have issues with that. If you aren't already teaching online, which I would be shocked if some of you aren't, this is key, believe me. Okay, utilize new platforms. This is a great way to increase inclusivity and interculturalism between ideologies and to introduce your students to new technological tools. However, be prepared for those platforms to fail. I cannot tell you how many times I have watched or tried to give a workshop with a new platform and it didn't work. And then you spend, well, now can you get in? Well, now can you log in? Well, now can you get whatever? It just is such a waste of time. So be prepared for when those platforms fail and say, okay, instead, I'm going to send you this form and I want you to fill it out. Or instead, we're going to break out into groups and you're going to talk about this. So be prepared for those new platforms to fail, because they will. And then have assignments in place. So when your students can't get into class, when your students miss class, when your students get sick, when one of your students gets coronavirus and can't come to class, have assignments ready for those students to have like makeup work. But then also the key to flexibility is attitude. You have to have an inclusive and flexible attitude when you're approaching this. Your students will get sick. Your students will get depressed, will get anxious, will get overwhelmed. This is not a maybe. This is an absolutely going to happen. So having flexibility and putting their health and wellness above mandates is essential. Because, for example, one of my students has been struggling with some depression and anxiety, and he had to take a week off from class. And as someone who has a history of mental health issues, I was very open to this. And when he got back on his feet, He immediately spent a week and did all of the homework, completed his work, and he was like, well, I can work with, this person's a little behind. Can I do an assignment with them? So if you give your students that flexibility, not all students will appreciate it. Not all students will pay it back, obviously. You have to know your students. But having that attitude allows your students to not get overwhelmed, to not get depressed. And that during this time is essential. So strategy number 2, and yes, I'm getting questions about this. You will absolutely have access to this presentation. I'm going to give you my email at the end, and any of you can send me an email, and I'm happy to share this with you because I'm kind of having to go quickly through everything. But yes, absolutely, you can have access to this because I have a lot of sources and resources like at the end that you can have access to. So, okay, cooperative learning is like my favorite thing, but this is how we apply this in our classrooms through the English language programs, group work and teamwork. So this is a really good way to have asynchronous, like without the teacher, group work and group reflection, because this reflection is what is essential to them creating and being responsible for their own learning. So having group work and teamwork that can be within the class as well as outside of class. We've been utilizing, in our class, I have 16 students. We've divided them into 4 groups. Each group has a group leader. That group leader changes, and they essentially adapt. So we give them assignments for like group discussion. And in the group discussion, they have to talk about, they have to reflect on, for example, the ending of a book. And because when I ask them in class, so what do you guys think about the ending? Nothing, because they haven't digested it, And so giving them that opportunity is key. It's also a really good way to have in-platform conversations. So if you're using a platform like Zoom, and I think Google Meet can split into groups, I'm not sure, honestly, having them have that in-platform conversation is also a great way to kind of share ideas. Okay, classroom roles. So for example, and if you want to send me an email about this, I'm more than happy to help you. Have someone in your class who is in charge of motivating the students. Have someone in your class who is in charge of sending memes and motivational, pictures to your WhatsApp group, or your Facebook page. Have someone in your class who is in charge of keeping track of who is participating. They have a list and they say, okay, Anna spoke really well today, or Hesler needs to speak more in class, or this person was incredibly active in our group discussion. So give your students a role, a job in the class. Make someone the Zoom link leader. That person sends the link every day before class, because what that gives them is personal responsibility in their own learning. Motivation comes from a lack of purpose, or lack of motivation comes from a lack of purpose. When students don't feel like they have a purpose in class, when students don't feel like they have a place in community, they lack motivation. Giving your students a role, giving them a job in class is a surefire way to include them in their own learning. So that is incredibly useful, and it comes from these ideas of cooperative learning. Reflection and reaction. So this comes from these kind of group reflections or even writing reflections. Give them time to reflect. And this is a great way to utilize, instead of teaching writing, they reflect and you edit their writing. Instead of teaching, creative writing techniques, they practice it and they apply it in their reactions. So that's another way that classroom community can be utilized. So then improving social skills. This is a big segment or part of cooperative learning, and it's a little bit difficult. Social skills are all about interaction. Social skills are about empathy and, being proud and comfortable with diversity and being, comfortable in groups and with teamwork. And it's really difficult to teach that when everything is virtual. So I would really encourage you to take this time to create a sense and understanding of digital citizenship with integrity in your students. So what this means is that now your students are not just, posting things on Facebook, sending things on WhatsApp. They're more than ever, students are thinking before posting. Teachers are thinking before posting things because they know that students are online 50-60% more than they were ever before. So use this time to teach your students how to be good digital citizens, because this is an incredibly important skill that will only become more important as time goes on. And even though we can't really improve these empathetic group interaction skills as well, you still can, but I would definitely take this time to focus on digital citizenship. I think that that is essential. And then 100% responsibility. Have your students take responsibility for their own learning. What this means is that obviously I'm working with kids between the ages of 14 and 25. So it's much easier for me to ask them to take responsibility for something because they're teenagers and adults. If you're working with children, it's a little bit more difficult. And honestly, I don't work with children, so I don't have as many strategies specifically for younger kids. But the ways that they take responsibility for their learning is by having classroom roles. Having a job in class. This person keeps a timer. This person is in charge of encouraging their classmates to do their homework. It's encouraging them to complete their homeworks. It's giving them, simple competition, but it's also, I hesitate using competitiveness in education. I don't really like that form of teaching, but that's a personal thing. It has nothing, there's lots of benefits in competitive teaching. But it's giving students motivation and purpose in their classroom learning. And this also allows, be creative, allow them to be creative in their assignments. I've had a lot of my students that have asked me, can we be more creative? Can I make a craft? And yeah, absolutely. But again, I'm very fortunate that my learning context is incredibly flexible. And so I can incorporate these kinds of changes. But so those are the ways that I would incorporate cooperative learning in the classroom, in the digital classroom. So then we have our asynchronous and synchronous. Now, what I was talking about earlier is that this strategy requires balance. And I can't tell you how to balance this. I can tell you what has worked for us, and I will in a second, but I can't tell you how to balance. This is totally up to you. So currently we're working at about actually it's 50-50, synchronous and asynchronous learning. But for a lot of schools, it's like 80-20. 80% synchronous, 20% asynchronous. And this is exhausting. This is exhausting for students. This is exhausting for teachers. So I think that that's something that you really have to think about and talk to other teachers, talk to people that you're working with, talk to people from similar contexts. And I'll talk about that actually in a second. So in our asynchronous, we're working through platforms for the most part. So research the platforms that will best work for your students. For us, Google Classroom has been unbelievable. It is the best. It's so cool. And it's very simple. It keeps track of grades. It allows you to post videos, images, documents. It allows students to upload from Google Drive. It's incredible. And I've loved using Google Classroom. It doesn't use that much internet compared to maybe some different other platforms, but I've really enjoyed using Google Classroom. And my students have adapted to it very well and very quickly. So then the second set are platforms from your curriculum provider. So for us, we use Richmond in my program, and we're very, very happy with their learning, their LMS, their learning management system. It has allowed us to teach and reinforce grammar in a really simple way to where we only have to teach the basics, and then the work that they would have done in class, they're able to do outside of class, and they're able to do asynchronously. But something that I've learned is that my students are doing much better on their homeworks when I give them the opportunity to work together. So at this point, it took them a long time to adapt to this not being homework. This is part of what they would normally do in class. And it's really hard for them to kind of conceptualize that, because in their heads, this is still just homework. So in order for them to complete their homeworks, which aren't homeworks, they're part of the program, I have encouraged them, just work together. At this point, I don't even care if you cheat. Like, as long as you're working together and you're both talking about it and you're both trying to apply what you learned in class, I don't care how you complete it. And maybe I'm wrong, I'm sure I am, but I've noticed a serious increase in both their grades, completion, and participation when I gave them the chance to work together. So then Moodle, and there's lots of other platforms, but this is just another example of a learning management system where you can kind of create your own online classroom. So the keys to success that my team have noticed with asynchronous learning is group work and teamwork. Allow them to work asynchronously without the class, but in a group. This will push them to finish their work, because when they're dependent on each other, this is that positive interdependence from collaborative learning. When you allow them to work together, it creates responsibility on each person in the group. So that's a big key to the success. The sense of personal responsibility. When you give them the opportunity to work as a group, you're saying, okay, this person is the leader, which gives them sense of responsibility, but then that person then encourages the other people to help them and to work together. Give them assignments that require creativity. My students have kind of gotten tired of doing the same thing, so having them, watch a YouTube video, make a YouTube video, listen to YouTube videos from people who speak different Englishes and stuff like that. It's been really effective. And then you have to give them a solid understanding of why they're doing asynchronous work and why it isn't homework. So what I think this requires is, like, I had a big talk with my students and I said, if you don't finish your platform work, you can't finish our program. Like, it's not homework, it's not optional. These are parts of the components of our program. You have to complete them or you can't graduate. So I think being very clear with your students about why they're doing this work outside of class is really important. So then synchronous learning is this face-to-face. So I put this little picture of our class at Zoom, and so that's been fun. It's interesting, it's difficult, but it is fun. So the keys that we've noticed to the success of synchronous learning in this virtual world is have your students, if they can, always have their camera open. This is accountability for you as a teacher to know that your students are there and paying attention. It's also accountability for your students. I will say there are a lot of internet, when it gets slow, turning off your camera is a really good way for it to speed back up. So we give our students that option if and only if they are having internet problems. Use the chat and the reactions and emojis and symbols, because, oh my goodness, it wastes so much time to say, like, are you understanding? And it's like, yes, 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 yes. Yes, like there's a kid that's always 2 seconds, 3 seconds behind. There's a million kids that all try to talk together. It just becomes chaos. So use chat and reactions and symbols. It's very helpful. Allow your students to take breaks. I've learned through our I would say, honestly, 40 minutes is the maximum that our students want to sit there and work. We push them to an hour, but that's kind of where they really are comfortable. And then allow students to share. Do give them that opportunity because they really want to. I know they do. And obviously this depends on your class size, but use the raise hand function, use, thumbs up function, use something so that they can raise their hands to communicate in class, but also encourage, some kind of organization so it doesn't just descend into chaos. So those are my keys to success for asynchronous and synchronous learning. I would highly encourage more of a 50-50 balance. I have seen that work much better, and even some other groups within our program have moved towards more asynchronous learning. But the biggest hurdle is making sure your students are understanding why. If they don't understand why, they're just going to think about it as homework and they won't finish it, I promise. So that's those are my strategies for asynchronous and synchronous learning. Okay, strategy number 4, which I think is the most important, is connection. So use me. I'm giving you this workshop. I love talking about this. I love, this is what I'm learning about in my master's. This is what I'm applying every day. This is what I am working towards in everything, is having connection with my students, with my teachers, with my administrators all over the country. And it's essential. So make sure to maintain those connections with your students, your fellow teachers at your school or within your program, and with new teachers. So find teachers in, there's lots of Facebook pages. You can talk to me. I have lots of teachers all over the country that I'm sure would be happy to connect with you and talk about how we have how I lost my train of thought, how we have adapted to this new normal. And so please feel free to reach out, ask questions. I've got lots of resources. I have lots of teachers that would love to talk. And then also join some Facebook pages or talk to your own teachers. And don't just talk about school. Talk about, one of my students was diagnosed, tested positive for coronavirus this week. And that's been really hard on my teachers, on me. My students don't really know yet. And so it's been difficult. And it's something where I have to be connected to our students. I have to be connected to this student and support him and help him and show him that your health is more important than school right now. And so make those connections and maintain those connections to help you just be the best teacher you can. So then I have this, and again, you guys can scan them now, or I can send this later, whichever. So the UNESCO, world organization, they have a really great list of different apps, websites, just different resources for online digital teaching that I went through their list and I was overwhelmed. It was great. And it has some different apps for play and for interaction and for group work. And so I would highly recommend going on their website, because obviously I have not used even 1% of all of the platforms out there. So I've seen quite a few questions about what app should I use for this? What app should I use for that? And I don't know, because I'm like all of you. I'm adapting to this just as quickly and as chaotically as all of you are. And so I don't know exact apps for stuff, but I know there are lots of great lists of resources, one of which is this UNESCO resource. And then another Facebook page that I would really encourage you to follow if you're an English teacher, which I'm assuming most of you are, is the RELO Facebook page. So the RELO is the Regional English Language Officer. And her name is Ruth. She's great. I've met her, and she's very smart. And she is based in Mexico, but her region is Mexico, Guatemala, Belize, Honduras, El Salvador, and possibly some of the Caribbean. But their Facebook page has a lot of great resources, as well as webinars for digital teaching that are open for anyone. And so even if you don't work with the embassy or with the English language programs based from the United States, they're amazing resources that I would really recommend. And it has teachers from all over Central America that are involved and communicating. And so it's a way for you to kind of make some new connections or communicate with different people that have maybe similar contexts. And then that's it. Thank you all so much. Also, if you're getting bored with your presentation options in PowerPoint or in Google Slides, I was not paid by any means, but I love this slideshow template. But Slides Go, I literally found this to make this presentation. It's great. They're so cool. They have tons and tons of really cool presentations. So this is another way to kind of keep your students kind of more excited about coming to class if you're not using the exact same presentation every day. But so anyway, here's my LinkedIn if you want to connect with me on LinkedIn for some reason. LinkedIn is really important in the US. I have no idea if it's important here. And my email if you have any questions. And then we'll obviously have some time for questions. And then on my presentation, the last slide are sources. I did probably too much research for this simple presentation, but I have lots of good studies and research if you have any questions, or if you're kind of wondering about where I got any of my information. But yeah, so here's my information, and then let's answer some questions.
Thank you, Savannah. We appreciate your participation. We believe that all your knowledge will be very useful for us. So here we have some questions from our audience, right? So here comes the first question. How we can help our students to reduce the physical-emotional problems that studying online is generating them?
That's a really good question. And obviously I am not a therapist by any means. And I have no background in psychology. I've been through therapy multiple times, but I am not by any means, professional. I can't give professional opinion. What I have noticed is from experience is giving students a safe place to talk. So what I've noticed is that when I tell my students, I'm open with my students without being obviously unprofessional, but telling them, me and some of the other teachers, some of the other, administrators, we're all dealing with depression. We're all dealing with anxiety. If you ever need to talk with us, you are always welcome to. Opening that door and being honest about how we as teachers are struggling. This is not easy. And I think pretending that it's easy is can be kind of discouraging for our students, because they're sitting there thinking, oh my goodness, teacher Savannah or teacher Aristides can do this so easily, but we're all struggling. And so I think being open about that with your students while maintaining professionalism is a really good way to kind of start to approach that, as well as sharing resources. So like the Ministerio de Salud aquí is sharing a lot of good resources. I can share some different ones that I've found. If you follow, so AGEDE is the Association for Asociación de Jóvenes Expecarios de Departamento de Estado or something. But AGEDE, if you follow them on Facebook, they post a lot of really good webinars with professionals from all over Guatemala about these topics. So I would highly recommend following someone like them, or I'm sure there's other groups, but like there's a group called Tu Consejería, and it's a psychological, they're like a psychotherapy group here in Guatemala that's specifically working with people affected from with COVID. And so there's a lot of different resources. I can't think of all of them off the top of my head, but those are some ways that you can offer help to your students. So even though I'm open with my students and they can always talk to me, at the end of the conversation, I tell them, maybe you should consider or talk to your parents about talking to a psychologist, or, do you need help finding a psychologist if you would rather talk to one? And I think I think being open about that and not being like, it's not a secret, it's not weird, it's not strange by any means, it's not different, you're not broken, there's nothing wrong. But we all need help sometimes, and we all need to talk to someone. So I think being open about that is a big thing with the emotional part. Physiologically, I think it's just encouraging your students to eat well, walk around for 30 minutes a day. I mean, the basics of the CDC, the Ministry of Health. Encourage your students to stay as active as possible, I think is the best way to approach that. But I mean, allow your students to move, stand up if they need to, walk around with their phones. I think that if you're using virtual classes with phones, I think just being open about that is a good way to encourage physio-emotional health.
Thank you, Savannah. So here we have other question. What educational strategies can we use with the students to achieve a better understanding of the English language by teaching them through virtual platforms?
So I didn't focus this. All of this to me is applicable to English language teaching, but it's also applicable to all kinds of virtual teaching. Okay, specifically with English language teaching, I would encourage you to utilize YouTube. However, not in kind of a typical way, I think. What I've been using YouTube for is to teach American culture, history, and grammar, interestingly enough. What I have been including is I'm trying to find English speakers that have different accents and different dialects to expose my students to. They have really enjoyed this. It's been difficult, I will say. It has been a little difficult, but they have enjoyed it. And it's a really good strategy to, I mean, the world is all digital right now. So utilizing digital tools to make the world smaller for our students that are learning English is a really, really good way, I think, to expose them to people who speak English differently than you, than the videos they listen to, than the recordings for your classes or whatever. I think that that's one strategy that I've really liked. Another strategy is, and again, my program is informal or non-formal English teaching, but my students are incredibly very highly motivated, have very high levels of English. So it's a little bit easier for me to tell them, have a Skype conversation about this and only talk in English. And I believe that they do actually only talk in English, but it's harder, I know, for different groups to kind of encourage that. So I would say utilizing asynchronous learning through watching YouTube videos, introducing them to television shows, or even having like Facebook watch parties. There's so many movies on Facebook that I'm 100% sure are not legally supposed to be on Facebook, but it's a great way to encourage, you can have a watch party, which is where like your students can be watching at the same time, and you can like pause the movie and talk and chat in like the chat box. And so that's a really good way to utilize virtual platforms, not use too much internet data, and still be able to communicate with them about English language. I would also really encourage, students to read. I mean, I can give you a website right now. I don't remember what it is. It's like zlib.org or something. It has every book you can possibly imagine in a PDF. Find books that are on their reading level that are in English and send them to them. Have them read them. It's a great, literature is, once you reach a certain point in English or in language learning, literature has been the only way I have progressed. Reading in another language and understanding it is so difficult. So I would say utilize literature, because they can print that if they want. It's not a virtual platform. They aren't using internet to read. So that's something else that I would kind of encourage. But there's a million. I could go on and on and on about different educational strategies. But to incorporate better understanding, utilize YouTube, watch parties, asynchronous group work, and I don't remember the last one, but yeah, those are my suggestions.
Okay. So here we have other question that includes like kind of the background of our country. So said, it is so sad that many public schools students don't have a cell. If they have one, don't have access to internet. So what will happen with them?
I have a lot of opinions about this that are not at all professional opinions. So, you know, I don't remember who said it, but someone in like the 1960s during the civil rights movement in the US said that education is the great equalizer, right? Which means that all of these students from totally different backgrounds, races, classes, all come together in a school building and they're equal. They receive the same education, they receive the same textbooks, they receive the same, resources. And now we don't have that. Our students that otherwise would not have internet or would not have access to a computer or would not have access to notebooks, books, etc., they don't have access to it. And I think that it's been incredibly telling and sad all over the world. I mean, it's horrible right now in the US. And I mean, it's bad here and it's the same in so many even developed countries in the world. But so, okay, some of the ideas that, so our programs are non-formal, but I represent the embassy, but then I partner with a local organization in my department. And the name of the organization is AKEBI, and I love working with them, and they are brilliant, and they're very aware of the situation here in Quiché specifically. What the director, when this whole thing started, he actually had some really interesting suggestions that we didn't use because we were able to financially allocate money to internet. But one of the ideas that he had was to put content on flash drives or on CDs. And for students that do have computers or can access a computer, to be able to take them, or even take them to those little stores that have computers, digital cafe, to print off work. Obviously, this is a little bit totally different based on your kind of context, but I thought that was a really good suggestion. Also utilizing Cargo Express, because I have students, even though my program is based in Chichicastenango, I have students in Sacapulas, in San Andres Sacabajaj, or however you say that, in Patsun, I have students all over Quiché. And so he suggested, utilizing Cargo Express to print and send materials, which I also thought was brilliant. And so there are ways. I would have to kind of think a little bit more about strategies for that, but it's incredibly hard. It is incredibly hard, and it's very sad that we're working with students that have no devices. They have no phone, no computer. So even if they have internet, they can't access any of the work. And I wish I had an answer. I really do. I really wish that I had an answer. And, I've tried even working with some different international aid groups and talking with them about providing devices or cell phones or whatever. And it's just really difficult, because usually the way that aid works is that they bring it from the US, they bring it from Europe, and no one can get here. So it is a really complicated issue. And if whoever asked this question wants to reach out to me, I would love to talk about it and brainstorm with ideas, because we need those ideas too. I mean, I think that this is a really common issue.
Okay, so how can we motivate our students to keep on track with the online learning?
This is so hard. I created a system of accountability with our students. So essentially, if they finish 90% of their homework by the end of the month, they receive like a diploma or like a certificate, digitally, obviously, that basically says, like, if you turn this in at the end of the program and you have all 6 of them, you get to graduate, you get to complete the program. It's worked a little bit. It's incredibly difficult to motivate students to keep track of online learning. What I have, the example or the advice that my boss gave me in the embassy was actually really good. It's give them individual responsibility, but then also make it group responsibility. So for example, I have 17 students. 16 of them have to have all of their homework certificates, or they don't get a graduation until all 16, at least 16 of them, have all of their homework. So then it becomes, I'm not pushing them, they're pushing each other because they all want to graduate, they all want to finish the program. And if one person is missing, the group pushes that person. And so it becomes kind of interdependence between the class. I don't know if that will work. That is a current experiment that I am using. That's a great question. It's incredibly complicated, but I think giving them roles, giving them responsibilities in class, and then even giving them roles and responsibilities outside of class. So have someone who their role is to check homework. So what that means is that they text their friends and say, hey, have you finished, this homework on the Google Drive? Have you finished this homework on this platform? To just kind of remind them. I think that that's another way to kind of increase and encourage online learning. But it is really difficult.
Here I have an interesting question for you. How can I improve social skills with preschool students?
Okay, I am not even remotely qualified to answer that question. I think that from what I have learned, which is not much, about working with young children. Improving social skills requires good communication with the parents, which I know is really difficult. But I think that almost having like a small curriculum for parents of different social skills or different, even just like home skills that they can be teaching their toddlers or young children about, helping around the house, doing small chores, that teaches them, because a lot of social skills is teamwork and empathy, right? And so I think that working with parents and having like a small, not curriculum or homework, but maybe like this week, the class is focusing on sharing. So I would like parents to, incorporate this into their day-to-day, activities. And here, thankfully, most children have siblings. In the US, we have a lot of only children. And so this would be even more difficult. But that is my only thing that I can think of, because I am not qualified by any means to talk about like early childhood development and social skill development. But I think, you can always kind of incorporate different ideas of cooperative learning into families. So kind of maybe having like a small training with parents, talking to them about that. I think definitely including families is the only advice I can give.
Okay, do you have any suggestions for online warm-ups?
Ooh, that's a great question. So let's see. What I have used is, so for example, we learned about, so there's a form of teaching English grammar that is called FMUs. It's form, meaning, and use. And it's a really simple like construct for teaching, for creating a grammar lesson plan. And they're really, really easy. It's something where you can have like a portfolio of them that students can go back and forth and use if they need to teach specific grammar points. So the day that we taught about it, I introduced them to like FMU, just the letters. And I was like, what do you think this means? And I didn't give them any context, like no context. What do you think this means? And they were like, I don't know. So the warm up for that day was, I want you to run around your house. You have 3 minutes to run around your house and find things that start with F, M, and U. And like, they had 3 minutes, everybody ran and got stuff and came back. And that was a really good way to get them moving, thinking about things that start with F, thinking about things that start with M, because even though they're kind of advanced English language learners, it's always good to like have simple lessons that, you know, improve pronunciation, improve thought process, makes them think in Spanish and English. And so I've noticed that was really fun. We've also done rock, paper, scissors. So we've divided, like had breakout rooms of groups of 2 and play rock, paper, scissors. And then the winners were on one team and the losers were on another team. And that's how we divided the class. Honestly, so I recently was involved in the digital or virtual TESOL conference, and there was a great workshop about 7 ways to improve creativity in your classroom. And it was given by one of the curriculum directors at National Geographic Learning. And one of his suggestions, which I loved, was using photographs. Or it might not have been his, it might have been another person from National Geographic, but essentially their idea was to start with like open a class with a photograph and give your students the opportunity to talk about what's happening. What do you think happened before this? What do you think happened after this? Why did the photographer want to capture this? What do you like about the picture? Write down 5 adjectives that describe this picture. You know, write down 5 nouns that you can see. Write down 3 actions. Like it's a great way to focus on totally different grammar points, but it's also visual, and it allows your students to kind of think and start thinking in English and warm up their brains virtually. So I've noticed, I loved that idea. We've utilized that not as a warm up, and I've noticed that it's very effective. So I really like that.
And I guess the last question is, how long do you suggest to be our online lesson? I would very much encourage, do not have classes that are over 2 hours long. At 2 hours, almost exactly, I notice my students doing this. And like, just not paying attention. They're like looking up, they're, you know, messing with their fingers. 2 hours, I think, is the like max. We teach, so we have 2 hours of virtual classes 3 days a week, and a 1 hour like optional class on Wednesdays. And so our classes, we do an hour of work. They have a 10 to 15 minute break. Then we have another hour of work. And that's been pretty effective. I would say definitely don't go over 2 hours. But again, it's really difficult. Like I said, I have a lot of flexibility. I don't have, you know, a government or a district or, you know, departmental mandate telling me how much time I have to do. So if you have the opportunity to be flexible, that's what I would suggest. No more than 2. Thank you very much, Savannah, for your participation. We enjoyed all your ideas. We are very grateful to have you here. And well, I would like to take the time to address some final conclusion of this interesting topic, right? So we can conclude that in this global new reality, in where we are not preparing in an immediately way for the teaching process, because we are dealing with some struggles like limited access and not enough digital devices. In addition, we are dealing with visual emotional issues. The motivation of our students, it's very important. So we have to take in consideration all the context, not only just for the teachers, but also for our students. Okay, so as a teacher, it's very important to take in consideration, define in a clear way our strategies to teach EFL through a learning process, using flexibility and the inclusion. Also, the implementation of new applications and digital platforms, recording our classes and explanations, and having a backup because everything can occur around us and our students. In that way, it's essential to check that our students won't be overwhelmed with the situation and with all this process. Also, we can conclude that cooperative learning will be one of the best ways to teach online, promoting the interaction among the students and teachers, introducing the group reflection, assigning clear roles to our students, applying the active methodology inside the class, and improve social skills in order to prepare digital citizens with values and promoting the self-education and the autonomy. And finally, it's essential to design a nice class with a balance within the synchronous and asynchronous activities. We had to take the time to apply asynchronous through group work because that will create responsibility in our students, assigning them clear roles to motivate them to continue learning. And we had to make an emphasis in the importance of the assigning roles also for the asynchronous activities. Don't forget we can have the recommendation to make or to include a synchronous strategy for no more than 40 minutes for our presential classes, face-to-face, right? And important thing for to apply strategies will have or create a connection with our students in this new learning, in this new process of teaching learning activities. So that will be like the general conclusions for this new knowledge that we get today. So remember, thank you for participating with us in our webinars that we have in the Facultad de Humanidades, Sección de Idiomas. The link of the attendance list will be posted in the at the end of this webinar. And we want to invite you to participate in our next webinar. So please pay attention to our information in the Sección de Idiomas. Thank you, Savannah, again for participating with us. Thank you for all the audience to be with us. We hope that you enjoyed this activity. So it was a pleasure to share with you.
Thank you so much. And I'm going to be sharing some different links in the chat that people asked for. So just to be aware of that. But thank you so much for having me. I was really, really happy to share.
Thank you, Savannah. Thank you to everybody. So we are going to be in contact next time.
Okay, so that's where you can get books.